We have got some movement in the NBA, ladies and gentlemen. As I'm sure you've all seen by now, the Utah Jazz have traded Donovan Mitchell to the Cleveland Cavaliers in a pretty unexpected trade, if you ask me. I mean, we all knew Donovan Mitchell was likely getting moved, but it was a surprise to see him get traded to the Cavs. Not a team that was talked about in terms of being in the running to land Mitchell, but their offer was clearly the most enticing, and here we are now with the Cavs improving their roster even further and being yet another threat in the Eastern Conference. So in today's video, we're going to be discussing the parameters of that trade, what it means to the Cavs, the league at large, and more importantly, what it means to the Bulls and how they now stack up in the Eastern Conference. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. So after a pretty dead period in the NBA where we had very little news and updates aside from all the drama shenanigans coming out of Brooklyn, but heading into Labor Day weekend, we got the trade that we have been waiting for in Donovan Mitchell moving out of Utah. Now, as for the specifics of the trade, the Utah Jazz are sending Donovan Mitchell to the Cavs in exchange for Lauri Markkanen, Agbaji, who was the Cavs lottery pick from this recent draft, Colin Sexton, which was done via a sign-and-trade, and 3 unprotected first-round picks. Honestly, it's pretty unprecedented, the number of unprotected first-round picks we've been seeing get thrown around in today's NBA. Like, people were talking about, the Bulls were giving up too much in trading 2 first-round picks to the Magic for Vucevic, but hey, at least those were picks that were protected, top 4 protected, and it was only 2 picks. 2 protected first-round picks seems to get you nothing these days with the amount of draft capital teams are throwing around. But anyway, quite the haul for Donovan Mitchell, although I will say I didn't find this as egregious as the haul that the Timberwolves sent to the Jazz for Rudy Gobert. Just given Donovan Mitchell is 5 years younger, his contract isn't as bad considering Gobert is now in his 30s on a max level contract. You're probably going to be able to at least trade Donovan Mitchell if this situation were to arise with his contract, whereas Gobert in his 30s is likely going to be a little harder to do. And you could even argue there is still some upside to Donovan Mitchell, who is just now entering his prime, whereas Gobert is not. You kind of know what you're getting at this point, and he could again be on the decline soon. So it is pretty crazy that Gobert fetched more picks than Donovan Mitchell did, but hey, it's all about how much a team values a particular player and how much they value their draft capital. Now, I will say this is actually a pretty great trade for both teams. Like, for the Cavs, they're getting a bona fide star level player that they've been looking for to pair alongside the up and coming star in Darius Garland, which will make for a very strong backcourt on the offensive end. I do think there are going to be some question marks about their fit, given Garland and Sexton didn't really fit well together. But who's to say that it's going to be that much different when it's with Donovan Mitchell? But we'll save that for another day. But not only that, the backcourt of Mitchell and Garland to go alongside with the front court of Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen, that is a very strong squad, a young squad that has a lot of potential for years to come. And for the Jazz, I mean, we all knew this once they pulled the trigger in trading for Rudy Gobert, but now after trading for Donovan Mitchell as well, it's clear this team is in a full tank / rebuild mode. So the trade works for them because they get 3 young players, both Markkanen and Colin Sexton, although, they've had their weaknesses in various areas, especially on the defensive end, but they're both still top lottery picks who are under 25. Well, Markkanen is 25, Sexton is 23. They also get a rookie lottery pick. He's only 22, and they get 3 unprotected picks out of it. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough. I talked about this when the Hawks traded 3 unprotected first-round picks for DeJounte Murray. That is such a risky move when they are not even top 3 protected, especially when they're that far out in advance, which these picks are, being 2025, 27, and 29. A lot can happen in the NBA where a team's big trade splash just doesn't work out, or there are injuries, and the team falls off. They get a top pick because they're at the bottom of the standings, and now they got to send that pick to the team that they traded with, which further perpetuates the downward spiral of being one of the worst teams in the league and not even having the benefit of picking up a talented young player. And look, you guys know me. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know I think the NBA draft is a crapshoot. You know that if my team is looking to win now and be aggressive, that draft picks shouldn't really be a priority. But there is something to be said about rebooting a roster and stacking a bunch of unprotected picks, because for the Jazz, in just the trades for Gobert and Donovan Mitchell alone, they have accumulated 13 unprotected or lightly protected picks. I believe the last pick in the Gobert trade in 2029 was the top 5 protected pick. 13 picks, though, for 2 players. That is an insane haul, and regardless of the draft being a crapshoot, with 13 extra picks, because keep in mind they still have their own first round picks, which will likely be high lottery picks for the next few years, given they're not going to be winning many games in the short term. With that many picks, you're bound to at least hit on a couple of those for a star or superstar level player. It's just the law of averages, right? You're gonna have so many chances to hit on a generational talent when you have 20 plus picks over the next 7 years. I mean, it's very similar to what OKC is doing in stacking up their draft picks most recently. But anyway, I think it's actually a good trade for both teams. I don't consider this to be a fleecing or an overpay like we saw in the Rudy Gobert trade, but if I had to lean towards who won the trade, I'd probably say the Utah Jazz did, just because I personally think Donovan Mitchell is a bit overrated, and with the Jazz tearing it down, you can't get much better than the haul that you got for him in exchange. What I will say though is it sucks to be a Knicks fan right now, because this was a trade for the Knicks to take. They could have made a deal work given the assets they had to bring in Donovan Mitchell, which was a destination Mitchell had expressed in wanting to go play in the past. The Knicks had the draft capital. They could have likely won the bidding war by just including another first round pick, or maybe even 2 additional first round picks to include with RJ Barrett, perhaps Obi Toppin, which is what was reportedly offered. But no, the Knicks stay the Knicks and never really knowing what the hell they're doing, overpaying on the wrong players, being too stingy with the right opportunities when they come their way. And on top of that, by Donovan Mitchell getting traded to another Eastern Conference team, the East just got that much more competitive, which likely puts the Knicks out of playoff contention yet again. I mean, the battle for the top 6 in the East is going to be crazy, so much so that you can't even say with certainty that the Bulls will be able to avoid the play-in, which kind of leads me into my next point: how competitive the East, the Central Division specifically, has become with this trade for Donovan Mitchell, and where do the Bulls stack up among these teams, and also how the lack of aggression this summer on the part of the Bulls has now put them in a bind and truly being competitive while they still have DeMar and Vucevic. Because here's the thing, prior to this trade, not a chance in hell I would have put the Cavs over the Bulls in the East standings. Still a good team, an up-and-coming team that you still have to keep an eye out on and take seriously, but they weren't going to be better than the Bulls. But now, the Cavs adding another all-star to the roster, the fact that they're all young players, like their entire starting lineup is going to be under the age of 26. Some of the guys still haven't even entered their prime yet. You can't say with certainty that the Bulls are going to finish above them in the standings. Now, I do still think the Bulls are going to be the better team between the Cavs, at least for this upcoming season anyway, again, as long as the Bulls can stay healthy. I think that the experience the Bulls have over the younger Cavs, who will still be getting used to each other in their new lineup, will be an advantage that the Bulls will have over them, and I think the Bulls have more depth than they do as well. So yes, I still have the Bulls over the Cavs, but I can't say that I'm super confident in that prediction. The Cavs are a much scarier team than they were before. The Hawks, another team that is a threat that could still be top 6 in the East. Obviously, you still have the top dogs in the East, the Bucks, the Celtics, the Sixers, the Heat, because no matter how much people think that they're going to take a step back, they still end up being a good and surprising team. Don't forget about the Raptors, and Jesus, don't forget about the Nets either. They may be a disaster of an organization and filled with tons of drama, but they've still got Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, who will presumably play the whole season, and now also Ben Simmons, who just took a whole year off and is fresh and ready to go. Like, that is a star-studded team that you can't rule out. So the optimistic side of me wants to say, regardless of all these moves and the Bulls' lack of moves and choosing to focus on continuity, that the Bulls are still going to finish top 6, likely in the 5 to 6 range. But if we're being honest with ourselves, knowing the uncertainty with Lonzo's health, not knowing if Vucevic is going to have another down season, not knowing if DeMar is going to be able to replicate what he did last season, is Zach also going to be back to being fully 100%? I'm not as worried as some of those aspects as others, but it's a lot of uncertainties to definitively say, yes, the Bulls are going to be better than the Cavs, or at a minimum finish in the top 6 in the East to avoid the play-in. I mean, a lot of things have to go right for the Bulls to really be a top team in the Eastern Conference since the front office decided to prioritize continuity and running it back. Like, that's fine that the front office decided to go in that direction. I get the rationale for it. But this Bulls team at the back half of last season wasn't good. So you have to hope everything goes well to really remain competitive in a now even better Eastern Conference based on the moves other teams have made. Now, with the trade of Donovan Mitchell and now having the Cavs elevating their team in the East, with that also comes an opportunity opportunity for the Bulls to pick up a piece that likely will be on the move based on the direction of where the Jazz are headed. I'm mainly looking at two players in particular who are both fairly valuable veterans who could play a role on a playoff team, and that's Jordan Clarkson and Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, I just put out a video last week on why I want to see the Bulls make a push for Bojan, really because of his outside shooting, also the fact that he's not a guard since the Bulls have enough guards as it is. I won't belabor the point here since I went into detail on that in that video. I'll leave it linked below in case you missed it. And then Jordan Clarkson, he's another guy I actually talked about the Bulls trading 4 weeks ago after the Jazz traded Gobert, and really using him as that scoring spark off the bench, what the Bulls have wanted to see from Coby White, but doing so consistently. Clarkson just won the Sixth Man of the Year award 2 years ago and is a bucket getter playing off the bench, knows his role and does it well, although last season he had a bit of a down year. But either way, these aren't going to be guys staying in Utah. They may not get moved before the start of the season, but I would be shocked if either of them are still in a Jazz uniform after the trade deadline. Now, what it would take for the Bulls to give up in order to get either of these guys? Well, remember, it's Danny Ainge. The Jazz are looking for young players and draft capital. The Bulls don't have much of either. The assets that they would have available to them that would entice the Jazz are Coby White, only 22 years old, Patrick Williams, only 21, but the Bulls have made it pretty clear he's not getting moved. Io, same thing. Can't see him getting moved either. Dalen Terry was just drafted. I don't see him getting moved. And for the picks, the only picks they're able to trade are the Portland pick they got in the Lauri Markkanen trade, which is lottery protected, and their first round pick from 2027 and beyond, of course. Obviously, a guy like Bojan Bogdanovic or Jordan Clarkson are not going to command multiple first round pick packages like Gobert and Mitchell, and if that's what Ainge is looking for in a deal for either of those guys, hard pass, definitely not worth it. Honestly, I think anything more than the Portland pick and Coby White and some salary filler to actually make the money work is probably too much for either of these guys if it's more than that. The Portland pick is lottery protected, so at best it's going to be the number 15 pick. You cannot, under no circumstances, trade an unprotected first round pick for either Jordan Clarkson or Bogdanovic. I don't care if it's 5 or 7 years out. That would be ludicrous. It needs to be heavily protected. Otherwise, no deal. There will be other opportunities to actually look at. But anyway, this is a pretty big move that really shakes up the landscape of the conferences in the NBA. I'm curious to see how it's going to work out for the Cavs. Also curious to see if the Bulls will respond by making a trade of their own, whether it be now or by the trade deadline. But let me know what you guys thought of the trade. Let me know in the comments, and as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.